Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pump the Love 2.0. This is one of the events we do in the month of February where, we kind of talk about all things like self-love, loving your diabetes, and kind of how the two connect. And so tonight's session is going to focus a lot on stigma, which I know is like a heavy and loaded topic, but it's also a really necessary one because I feel like we all kind of bond over the highs and lows, pun intended, of diabetes. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation. Here are your lovely hosts for tonight. My name is Rav Samra. I've had type 1 since I was 2 years old, and I come from a very large Punjabi family where any type of health condition isn't really well understood. So I personally get very excited to talk about things that make people uncomfortable because I'm all for being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I've been a part of the DHF community for about 10 years now, and right now I work as a program facilitator for the Hope Connects program with the university clubs. And like I said earlier, I'm super looking forward to tonight's conversation.
And my name is Asta. I was diagnosed at the age of 5, and I got my scholarship from DHF in 2019, which is how I kind of started mentoring and hosting as we are today. And I was also part of McMaster's Diabetes Association, so I have a bit of bias in this event because I totally root for them. But all the clubs are amazing. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm also currently doing my master's.
So here is a quick kind of overview of what we're going to get up to tonight. So the next slide will be a land acknowledgement. We'll talk a little bit about what DHF is doing at the moment. We'll talk about defining stigma, and then we're going to do a quick activity before we meet our panelists and jump into a discussion with them, followed by a Q&A where everyone here is more than welcome to ask questions, share in the chat some comments, and even if you post them throughout the event, we'll get to addressing them at this time, followed by an exit poll.
Okay, so we'll start with the land acknowledgement. And I know that this is kind of the one step towards reconciliation, and we do want to take action, but here's one place that we can start. So we recognize that Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers, including myself, have been invited into this territory, into this treaty, in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And we also recognize that you might not be tuning in from the Toronto area, so we invite you to go check out the native-land.ca website to learn more.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here and take the spotlight for just a few minutes. My name's Heather Miller. I'm the program director with the Diabetes Hope Foundation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with DHF, aside from your communication with Rav, just wanted to let you know about a few of the programs that we offer. So we have our Hope Connects peer support program, and that's got a few different pieces to it. One is the work we do with the Diabetes Club. We also have a Discord server for people to kind of chat and share what's going on T1D-wise, called T1D Campus Connect. And then we have our peer mentorship program, and a lot of our peer mentors are here tonight and do amazing work connecting with youth who are in grade 12, first year, second university, just to kind of help through that navigation and have someone to vent to or support you through all the challenges that come up with post-secondary school and also post-secondary school with T1D. If you're in one of the clubs and you're not familiar with the program but think you'd be an amazing mentor, please reach out to me because we're starting to recruit mentors for the next academic year. You can also go to our website and there's a mentor volunteer intake form that you can fill out, and then I'll send you an email and we can set up a time to chat. We also have the online transition guide, which has information about every public college and university across Canada. It's got information about academic accommodations, mental health supports on campus, student health insurance plans. So everything someone with T1D or someone who doesn't have T1D would need to know about sort of making the most of your time at university. We have a resource hub online that features our Transition in the Kitchen recipe guide, which has some quick, easy, healthy recipes you can download. And we're also building this out with other resources you can use. So check back in. So if you're looking for accommodations, we have a sample letter you can give your doctor to fill out, something to send to your profs to let them know about your T1D. So we're kind of building it out so you've got all those tools to make it easier when you start. And in April, we're launching a new arts program called Free to Be, exploring T1D through the arts. And it's going to be a combination of improv and visual arts, culminating in an art showcase in May. So it's for high school kids, but if you are really interested and feel like you need to be a part of it, you can absolutely reach out. We can let you know the information about that. And that's actually going to be run by two of our panelists tonight, Nathaniel and Amal. Again, if you have any questions about the work that we're doing, you can always go to diabeteshopefoundation.com and all the information is there.
We're going to talk about defining stigma for a moment. So, stigma is any type of negative attitude or belief or behavior that we have towards a group of people because of a certain situation in their life. It includes discrimination, prejudice, judgment, and stereotypes. And I'm sure for all of us who have diabetes or any other type of obstacle in our life, we can empathize with the fact that it can be very isolating. Diabetes is both a visible and an invisible disease, depending on what type of tech you wear, how comfortable you are with, checking your numbers in front of people. And it is an incredibly daunting thing to do to, check a device or say like, hey, I have diabetes, whether you introduce yourself to new people or even to people that you know. And my sister always jokes, it's not really a joke, but it's a joke between us, that the anticipation of something is almost worse than the actual event itself. So I know that when I'm going to, certain like family functions, I feel super weird because I know that some family members feel super uncomfortable with my diabetes. But again, those are lived experiences. And, it's great to kind of come together as a group like this to kind of debunk some of these myths and to just kind of, bond over these unfortunate circumstances.
And I guess the next key question is what leads to stigma? Because we defined it, but what about what leads to it? And a lot of it can be just a lack of understanding of what diabetes is, that misinformation about its causes, its management, consequences. I also think like sometimes it's unconscious, right? Like someone might not know that what they're saying is not necessarily true. And that's kind of where that education piece comes in and advocacy as T1Ds and allies of T1Ds. We know that stigma also amplifies this idea that the diagnosis is the person's fault. Type 1 especially, it's not that person's fault. And sometimes, there can be memes or trends, the classic like, oh, you're going to get diabetes if you eat sugar or if you do something, or it's like a flu and you can catch it from people, all these like types of misinformation that can be perpetuated and amplified. And also recognizing that every behavior and decision is made within a complex context. So stigma from one person versus another or a community can really be a complex combination of genetics or environment where they live. Maybe their socioeconomic status is playing into it. A lot of the social and psychosocial factors. You can kind of think of your own, like I call it like the intersectional identity. And that's what makes you, and also what makes your beliefs and your thoughts. And that can really add to the stigma, or it can also kind of help protect people from it as well. So something to think about.
So next, we're going to jump into a quick whiteboard activity. So you can scan the QR code. And the main thing that we want to address is some examples of stigma that you've faced. And what do you know about diabetes from the media? So go ahead and click the link in the chat or scan the QR code, and let's just jump into having a bit of fun here.
Oh yeah, the classic, can you eat that? Sometimes it's not
or
even
like when people say it with their eyes.
Oh yeah. But even then, I think of like the misinformation, like if they're not aware, maybe they're asking out of curiosity or kind of they want to make sure nothing wrong happens, but it's definitely an opportunity for you to advocate. And
it's the worst when you're halfway through the donut and they ask you that. And you're like, well, what do you want me to do at that point? What do you think is going to happen now?
Yeah, it's like, firstly, I'm not sharing the donut. Like if you're asking for the other half, absolutely not.
Oh, I love saying I'll eat anything that I like. That's my diabetes restriction. The type your grandma has, yeah. Although valid, like some grandmas do have type 1, but I think it's very common to kind of switch type 1 and type 2.
I'm wondering, because I know we have people who are both living with diabetes and people who are supporting, if Rav, you were asked to could do a quick breakdown of the differences between type 1 and type 2, because that's where a lot of the stigma and misunderstanding comes from.
So type 1 is an autoimmune disease. It's not caused because of something you ate. Sometimes it's genetic. So basically your pancreas are not able to produce insulin, and it can be managed by insulin. So sometimes through pump or injection. That's kind of like the main overview. And then we'll contrast it with type 2, Rav, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, for sure. So type 2 diabetes it affects how much your body uses that sugar for energy. So it stops the body from using the insulin properly, which can, lead to high blood sugar. And again, Asta was talking about how, health, there's so many things that intersect and kind of make us who we are. Obviously, it can lead to other complications or links with other illnesses. And I think a lot of the stigma around type 2 is like, well, you gave yourself that, right? Like, no one really looks at the genetic makeup of a person or, kind of like what that person is going through on a day to day. It's just very quick to be like, oh, well, like you eat too much, you don't work out. So obviously you gave it to yourself. So why do you feel X, Y, Z reason? And then I find, and I know I'm guilty of this too in the past, when I would tell people I have diabetes and they would, kind of jump into what we're saying here, like you gave it to yourself, you don't look a certain way. It's like, no, I don't have that type of diabetes. And like that also is incredibly harmful because it just is what it is. There's no point of trying to, tear down one diabetes from another because they're different, they're related at the same time.
Rav, I just wanted to add to that. Like, I just tell people I'm diabetic now. And I know that when I was younger, like that the assumption would usually be type 1, but now I'm older, I'm a bit bigger, whatever. If they assume type 2, like let them. Like I don't like you said, like I don't want to stigmatize type 2 diabetics at all. Just
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm diabetic. And if you care to know, I'm type 1 and we'll go from there. But yeah.
Yeah, and plus there's like so many different types, right? Like you have like
Yeah.
MODY, like gestational, and again, it is becoming a lot more common now. And that's sometimes it's kind of funny how people focus so much on like a cure or prevention when it's just like, okay, but for folks who have it and will get it, how do we make again our day-to-day lives so much easier? But that kind of gets lost in the conversation a little bit. I remember once someone told me that I, gave myself diabetes because whatever, again, like I said, I was diagnosed at 2, so I don't really know what lifestyle choices I made at 2 years old, which would have given me this. But some people are just, very silly and unpleasant to deal with.
I was going to say the being told it's easy one is one that gets to me because people think it's just a matter of giving yourself your insulin and then eating what you need to eat. And we did a workshop back in November about the 42 things that actually impact your blood sugar as someone with type 1 diabetes. So just the fact that it's thought to be easy and simple and you just need to do the math without realizing that the math hardly ever works out the way that it's supposed to sometimes.
The math doesn't always math. I also like the comment about the privileges and the unfair use of accommodations is also something we need to, I think, have more discussions about. I think sometimes students see other students taking, maybe extra time on a test or they get breaks or whatever accommodations that they're allowed and thinking that's not fair without really understanding why they're taking that break or why they need that accommodation to level that playing field.
And too, about it not being a real disease. This often gets compared to it's not as bad as insert other disease or illness here because it is, I guess, seen as manageable, but it's still like you have a part of your body that is not functioning. And people don't realize that, I think.
One thing I could say is for like the privileges is because when you get more OSAP, because you have diabetes, I always get told like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like, well, no, I'm also paying for lots of devices and other things. It does kind of less than balances out. And that's one thing I always get told about, like the privileges. Yeah.
So on this slide, we have our lovely panelists for this evening. So I'm going to get each of them to introduce themselves really briefly, and you can go in order of how your photo shows up. So we'll start with Taspia. So feel free to share a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taspia. I am a third-year undergrad student at the University of Scarborough. I was diagnosed at like 2.5, 3 years old. So it's been a while, and I got my scholarship from DHF in 2021. And then I've been, Rav was my mentor, and then I've been mentoring my second year since. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm sure we'll get to the fun stuff later. So Amal, if you want to go next.
Hi everyone, my name is Amal. I've been diabetic since I was 8 years old. I received the scholarship, I believe, in 2013. That's when I graduated, and that picture in the previous slide was me, which was really fun to see because I haven't seen that in a long time. I'm an artist, and that's pretty much it. I'll leave it at that. And I'll pass it over to Nathaniel.
Thank you, Amal. Hi there, my name's Nathaniel. I've been diabetic since I was 11 years old. I'll be coming on 19 years in May. I've done a lot of work. I went to school to be an actor, so I've been working as an actor, as well as a bevy of other odd jobs to help support that career. And I'm currently working with DHF as a program facilitator for the Pep Talk program. Pep Talks is sort of peer support network that we've developed for parents of kids with T1D going through the transition years, specifically for the Halton Peel region is sort of our catchment for that program. And I'm also, as Heather said earlier with the mall, we're launching Free to Be in April, which is sort of inspired by my theater background, just sort of helping to explore the chaos of life with diabetes through art rather than, like we were saying, how the math doesn't quite check out. I'll pass it over to you, Michaela.
I'm Michaela. I'm a university student at Ottawa, and I'm in my third year. And I'm currently a sponsorship coordinator for the U Ottawa Diabetes team. I was diagnosed when I was 11 or 12, I think. So haven't had it for that long. Well, I guess like 10 years. But yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm going to pass it off to Jeffrey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Parado. I currently study at the University of Windsor. I am currently in my second year studying business administration, and I currently represent the U Windsor chapter of the Diabetes Society. I can pass this off to Carmel now.
Hello, my name is Carmel. I'm a second year at the University of Windsor, and I just recently joined the club, and I'm starting to learn more about diabetes. I personally don't have diabetes, but some family member had it before, and that's why I kind of like to help people to stop the stigma around it and educate them more about diabetes.
With our first question, we're going to talk about a little bit about the representation of diabetes in the media. So I don't know about everyone here tonight, but like I sometimes dread watching a new series or a new movie because I like truly cringe at the thought of hearing like a diabetic joke. Air quotes there. In my opinion, if the representation of diabetes was more realistic and like actually funny, then I think I would enjoy it and kind of approach like watching these new programs or new segments with, without having that fear. And I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that the media is responsible for spreading some of this misinformation that like stresses that it's like the individual's fault for like getting diabetes, getting diagnosed, and how well they manage it. So my question is, how do you feel diabetes is represented in the media? And I was just gonna kind of toss this one to Amal first.
I'm really excited that you passed that to me because I have a personal story to share that kind of made me feel like, okay, I've had enough. Like if I see any diabetic related jokes, I'm going to pack it up because I was watching The Walking Dead a couple of years ago. And in particular, like that day, for some reason, I decided to watch it with all my family and friends, even though I usually watch it by myself. And that episode had a diabetic woman who was still alive throughout the apocalypse, which was already a lie, right? And everybody kept making fun of me and like cracking jokes during the time we were watching. And I wasn't as offended because we were family and friends, but it really made me think like, are they believing this? Like, do they think that this is like funny? It's funny for them, but it's not funny for me. So I think it's really important to, you could turn it off, but also challenge it while it's happening. So if you're like me and you're in that situation where you're watching with a bunch of people, you could be like, guys, no, this is fake. Like homegirl would not have made it 5 years after the apocalypse with some insulin in a container. You know what I mean? So I took that like as a positive experience, but when I'm by myself and I see something, I just fast forward through it. If it's not good enough, it's not for me. I'm going to throw it to Nathaniel because I saw him laughing at my story.
Yeah, no, I was just laughing because I don't know if anyone ever played this game when you were in like school where it was like we're all crashed on a desert island, who dies first? And I always died first because you crash on a desert island, you don't have your insulin, you don't have your endo's phone number, like your and so that wasn't fun. So anyway, that was what I was laughing at. But in terms of in the media, this actually came out yesterday or 2 days ago. There's a CBC published an article about a study that was presented at in Mississauga. Basically, what the heck is the the headline here, but basically I was just surprised at the lack of care given in this writing. The headline is Mississauga is facing an unprecedented diabetes problem, and green space could be a part of the solution. Basically, there was, I guess, some study that was being done by the folks who make Ozempic and U of T, and it was presented at Mississauga Health Day, like government symposium or something. But this article is basically talking about how now Mississauga is developing a city strategy to combat worrisome diabetes trends, and I was really sort of shocked at the lack of specificity in there. And again, I'm absolutely on board for not tearing down one type for the other, but I feel like the more diabetes is conflated into a monolith, the more that our identities and our experiences sort of fall away and just come kind of washed out. There was, I think, a sentence in the article where it talks about how type 2 is this and is that and is this, but it at no point does it distinguish the multifaceted aspect of diabetes. And I was just sort of disappointed, I guess, to be reading this. So I know that it's not like a TV media, but like journalism media, I was expecting a bit more, I guess, responsibility.
Sure. Yeah, because you never really know like who is like reading this information or who is consuming it, and like some way or another, it gets back to us, and because someone has credentials or someone has studied such and such, or if someone's accomplished in like some form of journalism, it's seen as valid, more valid than like lived experiences. And that is just so frustrating. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers that episode of Hannah Montana where Oliver has diabetes and he's like ashamed of it, and like Lily and Hannah think he's like dating the school nurse because he brings in like a box of chocolates, and then at the end, like they're like hiding all the brownies and stuff, and then he's like, no, like my blood sugar is low, I can't eat a brownie. Like I think that episode was actually pulled, but then it had to be like reshot or something because parents were complaining. But I'm just like, again, this is kind of petty, I'm not calm when I'm low. Like, in fact, that's when I'm my most unhinged self. Like I would be like swatting at people if they were trying to take a brownie from me. I wouldn't just be like, Zen. No, that's not my reality.
I'm also wondering, I know we talk about the negative portrayal in media. Any positive anecdotes or stories? And if you have any recommendations for things to watch or read, feel free to throw them in the chat.
I can kind of think of one. So I know the Babysitter's Club. I never read the books, but my sisters did. So obviously our parents being immigrants and like not knowing what type 1 is, being the only people who have some exposure to it, my sisters used their knowledge of the Babysitter's Club to really normalize me getting diabetes. And like, I think that's just so wholesome and sweet. And then I know the next Netflix also did a Babysitter's Club show, and I think there's some positive representation there, but I can't really speak too much to it. Maybe Amal can.
You beat me to it. I was going to say the Babysitter's Club. That is an awesome representation because it was so wholesome. You know what I mean? Like they showed like how she was getting bullied and stuff like that. And it kind of explained why she was in her new city. I wanted to add as well, reality TV is actually a great representation for people with type 1. I can't think of any shows off the top of my head. There's one show I've been watching recently where there's a woman and she says that she has type 1 diabetes and she's trying to get pregnant with her husband. So I thought that was a really, really cool, reference, because that's something that a lot of folks don't understand. And she's basically documenting how difficulty the pregnancy is going to be, but she's still going to kind of go through it. And I think that just seeing normal people that also have diabetes too, you're like, okay, cool. Like if she can do it, I can do it too.
Oh, great points. And I love like when they portray the stigma, like they show the negative, but then how to deal with that. I think that's really powerful. And Daniel's saying in the chat, yeah, celebrities like Nick Jonas.
The other one I remembered is Diabetti from Drag Race. If anybody's ever watched Drag Race, there's a drag queen and she represented us beautifully. I recommend, if anybody's into that type of stuff, her journey and the way that she held it down, it was amazing.
I'll add another recommendation if you're on Netflix, Purple Hearts. I feel like it's controversial, but I felt like it did a good job Yeah, Tessia, do you want to actually talk about it? Go ahead.
I was gonna ask everyone, like, how did we feel about it? Because obviously, Cassie, was that her name?
I think
Um,
so.
she was type 1 diabetic, and I know there was so much controversy over, the marriage and then trying to get benefits and like more affordable insulin, access to insulin. But that, like, there were a couple of scenes of her being just like low and then having to lean on just her like husband. I forgot his name too, sorry guys. Yeah, just that like his kind of panic was kind of real for somebody who doesn't know how to deal with, type 1 diabetes. If your partner is type 1 diabetic, sometimes my dad is just like, I don't know what to do, like, what is happening? And so just that like fatigue, especially when you're like below a certain maybe like blood sugar level, I thought that was cool. That was more than I've seen some other, media like portrayals do. So that was one thing I guess was like somewhat positive.
And I wonder if there's like a reverse stigma in a way. Like sometimes if I'm not like in the best mood, my mom will be like, "Oh, are you low or something? Are you high or something?" kind of thing. And we can kind of play into those emotions and see how they affect how we behave as well.
For sure. I'll get if I'm like acting really giggly and like really jumpy, then my mom will be like, are you high? Is everything okay? And I'll be like, most of the time I am, but that's besides the point. Yeah.
I think part of it is also generalization, right? Like everyone's different, every diabetic's different, um, and kind of having those stereotypes can really perpetuate that stigma. But it also it kind of helps us bond. But I'm gonna throw the second question out to our panelists, which is what are some of the consequences of that stigma? And we started to try like kind of get into that. Maybe Michaela, do you want to start us off with that?
So when I was first, I actually have kind of a cool story. When I was first diagnosed, I was like in grade 6, so I got like the typical jokes of, well, did you eat this? Did you eat this? I think that that's definitely one of the consequences, and it's not obviously their fault for just believing what they're, what's usually projected in the media because you're a kid. But that was something I faced a lot. But in that, right when I was diagnosed, I had all the people in my classes being like, oh, what did you eat, blah, blah, blah. And then actually one of my classmates, he came up to me and he was like, hey, I heard you got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Are you okay? I know that that's weird, like really serious. And it was the first time someone had ever said that to me that was like my age. And I was like, okay, well, how did you know that? And his name, well, he said, well, my great grandfather was the one who discovered insulin. And I actually went to elementary school with, his name was Connor Banting, but Frederick Banting was like his great grandfather. And it was really cool. And yeah, that was something that actually really helped me a lot because it was someone who like knew about it without me having to really tell them, which can be a really lengthy process of just being like, okay, well, when my blood sugar's high, I have to do this and I have to do this. And you go through the whole thing with them. And I never had to do that with him. And it was really interesting. But I'd just say some of the negative side effects from like what's being projected in the media is just, yeah, definitely like well, what did you do? How were you raised? Well, and it's truly not that simple. And it's a lot of, well, it's just not preventable in a lot of cases. And so, yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well, like my earliest instance of like talking about my T1D was I think in like grade 1 when I got my pump. And I remember just like having a really supportive pump team, my healthcare team, and they were just like, you know what, why don't you do a little like, talk at your next show and tell and just like have your pump be your show and tell. And that's what I did. And it was great. And then I did like a little presentation where my like parents typed up like a couple of celebrities, Nick Jonas, Halle Berry, they were all on that list. And then everyone was like, oh my gosh, these celebrities have, type 1 diabetes. I didn't know. I think it was like grade 3 when I first had like my first instance of, kind of the stigma of diabetes. And it was when like a couple of like the cooler kids, I would say, they didn't want to share their color pencils with me because they thought type 1 diabetes was contagious. And I was just like, and then my teacher didn't do anything to help because she was just like, oh, it's okay. Like they don't understand, kind of, just like brushing it under the table. And then she was also like, oh, can you eat this? Can you eat that? So it was not a great experience. But that definitely, like, I kind of like went back into a little bit of a shell because, that definitely, like, it was my first time hearing something like, oh, like people don't want to share with me because, they think it's contagious, or things can, like, I have to take so many extra precautions, or not everyone might see this as a positive thing. So that can definitely have an impact on, how you socialize and how you talk about your diabetes and how you own it as well. So that was just like, I think my first kind of, oh, okay, it's not all, that easy.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing that. I know it's already hard enough to have diabetes, right? It's already isolating, and then to have that on top of it. Yeah. Anything to add, Carmel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I remember when I was in high school and in my biology class, we were actually like learning about diabetes and the type of diabetes. And my teacher asked me, "Oh, I asked the class generally, do you guys know someone who has diabetes?" And I said I talked about my personal experience, and everybody in my class was kind of like, "Oh, it means that you're gonna have it too." So I feel like a lot of people are very ignorant and they don't really do anything to like educate themselves. Okay, I know we were young and stuff, but that was really out of pocket.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I know for me, a lot of the stigma and people's misinformation around diabetes really impacted, I think, my self-confidence when I was in high school, especially. And that was kind of the first moment where I ever experienced like diabetes, like burnout or distress, because it just makes you feel so crappy about yourself that people feel so entitled to enter your space and then judge you based off of how you look or like how well you're managing it, but they're not really taking in, again, your lived experiences as like your own personal truth. Because again, we can all kind of joke about people thinking our pumps are pagers, or the fact that we're like half robotic, but like to if we're not surrounded by folks who have diabetes, it can be really hard for them to kind of find the humor in those things. And yeah, that was my 2 cents. Yeah, Jeffrey.
Yep. I feel like a big part of how these incidents have happened is probably in which is where peer-to-peer culture plays probably a significant part in the amount of information that diabetes uh, of how information of misinformation of diabetes is spread within a community, especially when we consider like the context of the classroom or the school. Well, especially if the kids have not gained enough information about diabetes and its effects and the behaviors of managing it. I feel like by making those assumptions, it leads to a lot of self blaming and a lot of assumptions that kids who are diabetic may feel that they don't belong in that community, and that does create a lot of shame and guilt in their identity.
When I look back at like my experience and some other folks who have diabetes, when we talk about this, like we kind of can't really pinpoint a time where like the self blame kind of just like goes away, and then you kind of have this moment where you just want to like break through like all the barriers to just be like, I'm comfortable with my diabetes. I understand that it's not always going to be perfect, but like these are the cards I've been dealt with. This is how I'm going to live my life. And we've kind of touched on this in a few of our points here, where whether we're going into like the workplace or the school to kind of have little education sessions, or it's like, yeah, I have diabetes, I have a different perspective that's linked into like my gender, my race, my sexuality, whatever it may be. And so we can kind of create more authentic narratives, whether we pursue the arts or we pursue the business or sciences. And so I think that's a very beautiful thing. So I'm interested in hearing, how do we deal with stigma, and how could we even reduce it or kind of deal with it better on a day-to-day basis? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but I will pick on Nathaniel first.
Yeah, sure. I have sort of two just for thoughts on this. The first is just a tactic that I've adopted, which is when I found that if I project confidence when I'm telling people about my diabetes, when I'm saying, "Oh, just so you know, I'm a diabetic. I have this with me. This is like anytime you start a new job or a relationship or just like meeting new people, whatever, letting them know and letting them know with confidence, even if the confidence isn't 100% felt in here. By projecting that, I found that I have to deal with less of the annoying questions about diabetes. And then to pivot into sort of my second point, it instead establishes you as the authority figure in that relationship and you as the expert. So instead of being in a position where you're receiving advice, like unsolicited advice, which is the worst kind of advice, instead it opens up people's curiosity to ask you questions about it, to sort of be like, that's been a lot of my relationship with this is, and I truly believe that people want to help and want to understand. And so education is that opportunity, I guess, because what we've been talking about, stigma on its own isn't an individual's fault, right? It's that intersectionality that we were talking about earlier, and it's fostered by people's exposure to T1D, either if that's through the media or through people that they knew or through grandparents. Didn't explain the distinction between the different types or whatever. But it's not the individual waking up that morning and choosing ignorance. It's just that's what they have to work with. And so much of diabetes and having diabetes is unasked for burdens. And so this is an additional one, this additional emotional burden of having to educate on an individual level. But I think that that's the only real way when you encounter any kind of big systemic thing that feels too big to deal with, the solution is always the individual level and always the education, even if that gets annoying sometimes. And I think I'll wrap up in a sec, but what helps me in those moments is even when I feel annoyed, like I don't want to explain how the pump works, like I don't want to explain how it knows what the sugar is and all that. I think that every time that I do a little bit of that guerrilla education, not only is it helping me and this person, it's also helping this person in their interaction with all the other diabetics, all the other type 1 diabetics in the world, and it's helping everybody in this room, and it's helping everybody in our community by doing that bit of individual education. So that's me.
That was beautifully said. And I think everyone in this room has kind of that small piece to play, right? And I really liked what you said about, what was it, like the channeling the confidence. Like I'm thinking of that Rihanna meme where she goes, like, what do you do on the days that you don't feel confident? She goes, pretend, because that's all you can do, right? You put on your strong suit, your face, and you go in there and you do your thing, kind of energy. Any other thoughts on dealing with stigma?
I wanted to add, dealing with stigma, that's a whole can of worms in itself, but it helps to have like a diet buddy. And I know that sounds cheesy, but when I was younger, I used to have this friend and he was also diabetic. I was really lucky because he was very like open with like his type 1 and stuff like that. And every time people would make fun of us, we would just be like, they don't need to be part of this little club that we got going on. You know what I mean? Like he would have the code to my locker in case he needed juice boxes. Like sometimes I would have like, we used to use syringes back in the day, you know, a couple extra syringes in case he forgot his insulin at home because he was super forgetful. And I always felt like that made me feel so much better. Like even though it was just one friend, I was like, we have this secret little club, and anytime anybody annoys us, it's like we can just kind of like vent to each other. And throughout our years in high school, like we would kind of collect other people that were like as open as us, you know what I mean? And I feel like we found solace in just being friends and having the same issues, which is kind of a positive spin on the stigma.
Yeah, and I think just like adding on to that, community is huge. I'm like so happy for you, Amal, because I literally, when I came to DHF, was the first time I heard people using words like lows and like besides like my family, obviously, but like using the same vocabulary. And I think, you know, we've been talking about like not obviously bashing one type of, you know, diabetes over another, but it stands to truth. I think that like one type is much more widely known, and like T1D is such a, there's like obviously the part that's taught in class, but I think we're all just like subject matter experts in like our lived experiences with type 1 diabetes. And there's so much more to know about like, you know, lifestyle, mental health, like friendships, like, you know, social gatherings, if you're going to party, like just every transition. And like, you know, whether, I think it was the, should I mention the Discord? The Discord where we were talking about, I think, the difference, like between, my experiences as someone who's had diabetes for as long as I can remember compared to, somebody who recently got diagnosed. We can't necessarily connect on everything, and the types of stigma faced are like so different. But I think just like community and finding other people that, speak the same language as you, and then understanding that there is like such a vast depth of information that you don't know. I, for one, think that like whenever the topic of diabetes comes up in class, like we should be asked, like, what's your experience on it? Because I'm just like, oh my gosh, and this and this and this, where it's great to understand that biological aspect, and I wish people knew of that more because I think that would help. Like Nathaniel said, that, you need to educate people like, okay, this is an autoimmune condition. I can't necessarily choose when my, like pancreas decides to, or my immune system decides to, my pancreas or that insulin production part. But I think that's like all of those pieces connected, and just like keeping an open mind that there's so much that we don't know is like that first step to kind of like education and advocacy, and so much more.
Just to kind of add on to that as well, I remember when I was a lot younger, just through like elementary school, going into high school, I actually took myself off of my pump just because I was like the only person I'd ever seen with, like, I use Omnipod, and I took myself off and I went on to injections and just pricking, like I went off my Libre because I was very embarrassed about wearing that and not having anyone to like identify it or share something in common with. And that was like I was very embarrassed about that just due to stigma. And then whenever I came to my university, I remember seeing so many people wearing them. And then I met a couple friends, like I'd say 2 or 3 people who had diabetes, and I actually put myself back on the pump. I put myself on Dexcom and everything, and I found myself way less embarrassed once I had that like sense of community. And then I joined the diabetes club, and then now I'm doing this. And yeah, it's definitely helped to have people where your normal becomes just normal instead of completely exclusive to you.
I like what you said about when you see people wearing them, you feel less embarrassed, and I think that's sort of the boon to being self-aware of having things on our bodies. When we see them out in the wild, it does create this sense of community. I remember standing in line for my first COVID vaccine, and like somebody across the gymnasium was like, "You're diabetic?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Me too." And he showed me his arm, and it was beautiful. Or I had a time when I was performing in a show for kids, and we had a talk back afterwards where like the kids could just come up and like ask the actors for an autograph or like talk to us or ask us questions. And one kid came up to me, and he didn't have any questions about the show. He just wanted to show me his Libre that was on his arm too, and how he didn't know that people with diabetes could get up on stage and do fun stuff and have these kind of lives. So I think the more that we are able to get comfortable with that discomfort of having these things on our bodies and instead using them as a bit of a billboard for advocacy and community, I think that's huge.
For sure. And I think like that media aspect like is also so important. I like wanted to mention like Turning Red. I haven't watched like, in depth, but like us as a diabetes club, I'm part of U of T Scarborough's the Diabetes Awareness Society, shameless plug, but we recently did like a post on, just celebrities, athletes with diabetes. And, it was just, I think it was Lily Moss who wore her, I think it was her Libre, or her Dexcom, I'm not sure, or her Omnipod, but tech, while she was, walking the runway. And it was just like, being able, yes, exactly. Just like seeing those little circles on people's arms that like are in the media or like walking the runway, just like seeing that and what it is. And for little kids, I remember just having a single book on, a little like a young, I think like T1D, and that was it. there was like no media representation, no one wearing Libres. Like that was one of the reasons that I didn't want to start my Libre until like, I really had to. But I think like that representation is so important. That goes back to the media aspect, yeah.
I love the concept of making CGM fashion. Like that is chef's kiss, Like when I was younger, I was always afraid to like show my arms or show my pump site. But now it's like if I'm going to a party and I want to wear something where my arm is showing, I'm gonna wear it and I'm gonna feel good. You know what I mean? Like this is an accessory. It's part, it's like my purse. Like it's part of the whole package. I love that.
All right. I know we're nearing the end of our time, Heather, right? You got, I think, a slide more to go with. But if there were any questions for the speakers, I know I got one about the new Arts DHF program. If there's anything we can maybe drop in the chat, Nathaniel, I'm gonna ask you if you have a link or any poster, if they can email you about it.
It'll be on the social media. It's called Free to Be. In terms of details, it's going to be weekends in Saturday afternoons in April for 6 weeks, and then we end the week of May 12th with an evening showcase with basically what we're going to create together with these kids. If I can have the floor for like a hot second to talk about it, is and not just kids, but like sort of high school aged folk who we're going to get together. We're going to play some improv games, and we're going to, through conversation and play, identify a lot of what we're talking about here, a lot of the things that are distressing about diabetes, a lot of the things that are weird and silly and funny. And then we're going to explore this concept called Commedia dell'arte. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it's basically these big, funny masks that you put on and you become a different person and you clown around in them. So we're going to provide these blank masks. Participants are going to decorate them, make them beautiful. I'm going to be relying heavily on Amal's artistic background. And then through these characters that we come up with, we're going to take those initial concepts we devised and those distressors, and then we're going to make scenes about them. We're going to make little vignettes, and then we're going to string those together into a 40-minute show, and then we're going to invite parents, friends, and my favorite, healthcare professionals who are going to hopefully see what their patients actually care about and how diabetes actually impacts their lives. So that's my elevator pitch. I'm working on getting it shorter. But that's basically what Free to Be is going to be.
Awesome. So stay tuned to the website and social media.
Yeah.
All right. I'll pass it back to Heather and Rab. I think we had the thank yous at the end.
Yeah, we just wanted to thank our sponsors who have kind of backed us in putting events like this together. So the Aubrey and Marla Dan Foundation, Dexcom, Fluid Hose, Novo Nordisk, and two family foundations that we've been working with for quite a while, the Marlene Perkins Memorial Fund and the Sigulum Family Fund. And we could not do events like this without them and without everybody in this room, all the different clubs that have come together and shared your time with us. So thank you. Also, to you. And we're just going to launch a quick poll because the feedback we can take to our sponsors and get more money to do more events like this. And it also helps us make them stronger for moving forward. So launch that now. And Rab, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add as we wrap up.
I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, to Heather, to Asla, to the panelists, to everyone attending. I appreciate you all so much. I love getting the opportunity to get together and to talk about diabetes so openly and freely, and especially within a safe space, because I know growing up and sometimes even now, we don't really get that chance. And thank you so much for participating in the exit poll, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Always a pleasure. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.